Okay, great. Welcome to Spark of Aliveness. This is a very exciting podcast episode for me. I'm Darcy Sky. I invited Taylor Elyse Morrison, to come on to share this space. We had just met. I went to a networking event that she was running with a project, Women Facilitating. It was lovely. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But then we had a Zoom coffee, and I've been following her stuff on LinkedIn, got part of her newsletter, and there was very specific things that I really enjoyed about you, Taylor, as we were connecting. And I thought, I would love to talk with her about them. And we were just talking pre-hit record about how I just wanted to have this conversation in a slightly more public spot than if her and I were just chatting like Zoom coffee chat style. And I was like, oh my gosh, tell me how you think about this. What's this? I love how you do this. I want it to be just a available conversation. So that was my inspiration for inviting you on. Taylor is a coach and a writer and a speaker. I wanted to give you a chance to say hi and anything you wanted about and what brings you here.
Yeah. My name is Taylor Elyse Morrison. I am a portfolio careerist. I'm a lot of things. Like Darcy said, I'm an author, a speaker, a coach, a business owner and co-founder, a facilitator. And ultimately, I'm just a really curious person who decides like, hey, I would like to do that thing, and then figures out a way to make it happen.
That's so cool. And I can feel that. I was thinking about it beforehand, like how I might describe my impression and experience of you so far. And it's like there's this combination of spontaneous curiosity filled with action mixed with a rigor that I feel that you bring that is such a compelling combination that made me want to like, oh my gosh, I'd love to have Taylor come on and have a conversation. So I'd love to jump in. I wanted to share a little more of what I experienced when I first met you. So you invited through Women Facilitating people to a networking event right around Valentine's Day. And I have a relationship with networking events that's very hot and cold in terms of usually my ramp up getting into them is like, I hate this, I don't want to go, I don't want to put on a fake mask and act happy when it's really like really uncomfortable or whatever. So I had that experience going into it. And then I know enough to know like, if it's a good connection, if it's a good group, it could be fun and worth it. So let's push through and do it. But my experience at the Women Facilitating event was like blew expectations out of the water of what that experience and that connecting with brand new people could even feel like. And, you know, you were a strong part of that facilitating experience. And like just from the very beginning, like we arrive and that beginning awkwardness is very awkward, I find. And there was such a playful openness to it that you brought, and you had curated it. It had music that was upbeat and connective. There were questions that you were putting out there for people to consider and think about, all based on like that we're all facilitators and we're all coming to this. So you're asking like engaging questions. So right from the beginning, I had the sense of like, oh, this is different. And also a sense that like you and the Women Facilitating and all that, but like my first impression was that like you take the tools available to us, for instance, like a networking event, and then you dial it back into like, what are the ways this could actually be good connection? How could we actually create a feeling of connection? And then you put in what I would call like your tailorness to it. And then that helps it have a really different feeling than what we all might be used to a networking event has. That was that like initial impression. And then I want to just describe a recent LinkedIn post that you did where you said, many of you might have heard this, but like my definition of self-care is ... And it was so cool. To me, it was like bringing something that we might all, like a networking event, we all think we know what that is, right? And we all have our impressions of them. Or self-care. We all might have we do all have our own definition of that. But you like are willing to dial it back into its black, like, basic form and get us all on the same page around that and then put in your own energy. And like, I found your definition of self-care beautiful. It's like an internal listening And then once we've listened, we respond with the most love possible. I mean, that's Darcy's version of what you said, but it was like so beautiful. Like, I was like, oh, okay, I can get on board with that, right? Like, again, there's this like rigor mixed with curiosity, action, using the tools that are available to us, but doing them in your own way. That's this part that I'm really excited about that I feel you bring. Do you see that in yourself?
My first thought is I'm like blushing. I am receiving those kind words. I also feel like, especially for the women facilitating event, I have two incredible co-founders, Annie Grace, Shannon Varco, and even my long-term collaborator, Amelia Ruby, who we have partnered on other events together. And
Amazing.
so, while yes, I do bring some of my tailorness, it's also because I get to work with so many incredible women who bring their own gifts in how to make a space.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
I liked this vision that you said, though, of getting down to the foundation and then we're working on things together and maybe even reimagining what an experience could look like. I have seen that and named that in my own career, where I think we can say a lot of terms like self-care, for example. And I spent 5 years really thinking and theorizing on self-care. And if I say the word self-care, one person is thinking yoga, another person's thinking
Yes.
going to therapy, another person's thinking getting their nails done. And I think there's something about saying, this is what I mean in this room or in this LinkedIn post, and can we all enter into this together? And
Yes.
ultimately, you can make the definition your own. Another person can make the definition their own, but like having this shared understanding for now what we mean. And I come back to my own definitions to be like, wait, what does it mean to practice self-care? What does it mean to be magnetic or whatever other framework I'm
Yes.
thinking about?
Yes, yes, yes. To me too, the exciting part. I wanted to mention this too and get your impressions of it. The exciting part about being in Taylor's world, it's been like almost like a month, right? It's like we barely know each other, but there's this invitation to Taylor World, and when we're there, you have this ability to have the idea come in about the like foundational blocks of it, like let's all get on the same page of this, and then you have the ability to share it in a precision of your language that's, I find, rare. Like, have you always found that you're able to put words to things that other people find hard to describe, or do you enjoy that process of definition? Not only can you understand something, but then you're able to say it in language that's accessible to understand, and then you post about it. Like, then you share it widely. Like, that's a lot right there. Like, can you unpack that a bit or talk about your journey with that or your process with that, or like what is that like for you? Because to me, again, it's been one of those things I've been like, whoa, let's talk more about this because that's a big deal what you do there.
I, man, this is hard. I mean, I've always been a words person. One of my earliest memories is I had this Precious Moments book, and then I had this notebook, and I was writing, quote unquote, writing, but really I was just doing a version of this story that I had read before. Like I also remember my mom, before I was born, she was an English teacher, and she had this English textbook that was so dense, and I was reading it like it. I did not understand what these words meant in tandem, but the fact that I could read that this said the was so exciting to me, even though this was like a college textbook. So there's always been something about like information, reading, writing that I have been drawn to.
Okay.
I think there's an ownership that I've been stepping into. I can't help but make frameworks. It's how I make sense
Okay.
of the
Yes.
world.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Keep
so
going. This is
that's
exciting.
like
Yes.
that's just what I do. And I think in a similar way, it took me a long time to accept that I was a writer because writing comes relatively easy to me.
Okay.
It's hard for me to accept that I'm like a theorist or a philosopher or something. Like I like to make sense of the world. That's
Sure.
something that I've struggled to step into, but I'm trying to do it more.
Are more people reflecting to you that that's what they receive from you is like a bigger picture understanding, like that frameworks ability that you have? Like, if you didn't see it as a theorist, philosopher kind of thing, did you just see it as that's just how life is? That's what we do. We create frameworks and then move forward from that understanding. That's like how you just walk through the world.
Truly. Like I probably have one around here at my desk where I'll just be thinking through something and then all of a sudden I've created some type of framework around it. So I have these
Yes.
frameworks that I've built that I've never shared with people, but it just in a moment I need to make sense of something, and so
Yes.
that's what I do.
And to me, absolutely, and I feel that from you. And to me, the one of the exciting pieces of that is like where you draw your framework from feels like it lands in this place of like a truth. There's like a truthness to it. Like you go back to foundational pieces to build your framework. Whereas my experience might be that someone sure could build a framework, but it's based on something that I find to be like assumption or not to, or like something that's built on something else that's wobbly or whatever. For me, what I find, like when in your recent video, the way versus the whirl effect, or the whirl effect, I think was the name of the video, and it's like when you talked about what it was like what this was based off of, it was based off of you have a desire, you want something. Let's go back to that before we start to build all these frameworks that go in certain directions. Like, let's dial it back to this foundational place and ask questions about that desire. Is that something you really want? Where did that desire come from? Are you willing to build your life on it? Instead of just being like, all right, a dream comes in, an idea comes in, something you want to create comes in, and then, okay, you gotta, like the way that you were describing, do this linear process to achieve it. Instead, you were describing how, we can work this other nonlinear whirl pathway to achieve what we want. But first, let's really get into a place of like, is this something I truly want or not? There's this like, again, that foundational place that you're willing to bring it back to that I believe in my experience can be quite unsettling for some people. Why they might not bring it back to that is they might be nervous that at any point they're kind of like pulling away from ideas or thoughts that they built a lot on or are, come to a certain level of safety because of. To me, right, it like speaks to your like, you have this like really strong foundational safety level that's willing, and I think of like emotional safety or a general sense of like safety in the world that then allows you to dial things back to such a baseline level to ask some of the questions that I think some people might struggle to even ask themselves because of they're nervous they might find. Does that resonate?
It really does. And it's funny because, like I mentioned, I spent a good chunk of my career building this body of work called Inner Workout that was all about self-care and inner work and really looking at these concepts of how do I care for myself? How do I learn to trust myself? And at first I thought, as I decided not to make that the center of my career, that I was
Okay.
just done with it. And what I realized is actually that was the foundation, and I had
Oh,
spent a long time learning how to do those things with myself and teaching other people how to do those things for their self. That a logical next step felt like, okay, once we have that baseline of self-awareness and safety and understanding, now what can we start to do in the world, knowing that we have this
oh,
like
yes,
touchstone where I can always come back to
yes.
myself and regulate and care.
Yes, and
So
so much of your
yeah.
current work is this like curiosity and then action. Like your current moment is in like be willing to be curious. Sorry, I spoke over you there, but I'm so excited. It's like the curiosity and then the action. That feels like to me the moment when I'm engaging with your current moment offerings and sharings and videos and all that. It not assumes, it takes into account that we can be at a internally solid place. Where do we go from there?
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And I really feel that of like now that really clicks for me you've spent, again, that like rigor that you bring to how you think about things and what you create, you brought that specifically to the inner world. I would describe it like inner world, inner connection with oneself, inner, like you talk about self trust, a sense of connection with oneself, trust in oneself, solidity, core strength within yourself. From there, we have the bandwidth to be curious. We have the possibility to be curious. And then we have the backing to take action and the risk that those actions might involve because we come from a core solidity that's very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I didn't realize that it's much less that I'm building a separate body of work and more I'm building on that foundation that I am still actively cultivating for myself. And also I feel more ready to explore other possibilities, to lean into some of the frameworks like the whirl and what does it look like to try things and
Yeah.
not have to feel safe enough in myself to try.
Absolutely. Do you find in your client sessions, because I'm wondering, like, as someone who works with clients and, has private client sessions, like, do you find you're continually making bespoke, unique frameworks for them based on what they're sharing with you? One of the gifts you offer is you can provide a framework of, like, okay, this is what I see happening in your life. I might frame it like this. Does that resonate? Does it, like, do you find yourself just constantly creating and offering frameworks to the people you're working with?
That's interesting to think about. I think I try and build off of what they're sharing.
Okay.
So a lot of times it will be something like, okay, I hear that you feel like the only options in your situation are to go in direction A or direction C.
Okay.
Is there something in between that you could explore?
Okay.
Is there a way that you could go in both directions at the same time? And so, like, getting people to create their own frameworks. I also have been really intrigued by this concept called cognitive metaphor theory or conceptual metaphor theory, which essentially is a really academic way of saying that the human mind, we make sense of the world through metaphors. A lot
Uh-huh.
of the metaphors we hear in the world are war metaphors, like, yeah, like, oh, I really killed it, and that's supposed to be a good thing. Like,
Yes.
that's a whole other
Exactly.
conversation, but
Yes.
we're already working in metaphors. So the world framework, for example, is kind of a nature metaphor that I've turned
Absolutely.
into a framework. In coaching conversations, clients are often using metaphors. They might say that they feel really weighed down by this. And so we could explore the feeling of being weighed down and what they might like to feel instead.
Uh-huh.
So I think there are lots of ways to take the client's words, the metaphors that they're using, and to imagine new and different possibilities and build frameworks to move through them.
Yes. And to me, you tell me if this sounds right, but it's like to me, your trust in that, like, there's a framework that exists for everyone. Our imaginations are unbounded in what we could create and see. And your job is that because you hold the trust that a foundation or a framework exists that's going to specifically serve this client in their specific situation for the, like beauty they're here to create or the goal they're here to achieve or whatever it is. It's like the fact that you hold the space that knows there's a framework and you're just here to support the client in finding their way to the framework that supports them the most, that feels incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And sometimes it could be an existing framework and it really
Mm,
resonates with
yeah.
them to use something I've created or something out there. But other times it is there's something that they want to be guided towards and they can have a guiding metaphor, a guiding question, a guiding
Mm-hmm.
image, a
Mm-hmm.
guiding archetype that keeps
Mm-hmm.
grounding them back to what they want in life, or
Mm-hmm.
even it doesn't have to be as big as life, what they want this year,
This
what they
moment,
want this month,
exactly.
this
In
moment,
this
exactly.
relationship, exactly. I love that. And one of the things that came to mind as you were just talking is my experience of, for instance, taking in a video that you've done, like the way in the world, like the video you did. I was watching it again in prep of us talking, and I was like, my mind was like, okay, know the concepts she's talking about, be able to discuss them with her, blah, 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 like be, like informed, right? I was coming at it from a place of like, I want to be informed as you and I have this conversation. And what actually occurred is like, I put my pen down and I just was like with you in what you were sharing. And what I want to speak about in that was that how, because my experience is your mental frameworks, your mental acuity, ability, all that is super strong, and there's a lot to trust within that like mental ability you have. So it actually allowed me, and this is going much more into the energetic and like just my experience of it, like it allowed me to calm, just listen. And as like your words were washing over me, I got a lot of my own ideas coming forward, a lot of my own inspiration. So much that I paused your video and went on a whole other track of some other project I'm working on and da 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 da, because those inspirations were coming as you spoke. And yes, in my head was like, you're talking to Taylor in only a few minutes, and so you need to stop this because you have blah blah blah. Yes, that was all true, but the reality was my experience again of how you hold. I would frame it as this like a mental kind of strength allowed me to go into more of a creative, inspirational, emotional place where I could create. Oh my gosh, like I didn't expect that to necessarily come out. What do you think of that? Does that resonate for you? Have you heard that before? Like, yeah, I'd be so interested.
I mean, that's ultimately what I want. So I'm just thrilled hearing that because, and we talked about this a little in our coffee chat that we had.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like build a cult of Taylor. My goal is to help people
Yeah, totally.
build their
Their
most
own
fulfilling
self.
life. Yeah. So
Yes.
when to
Yes.
hear like a video
Yes.
that you're listening to of
Yes.
me is getting you inspired to do your own work in the world, I'm like, that is it.
That's it.
That's what I'm here to
That's it.
do, is to
Exactly.
show people what's possible and then to support them as they're creating whatever they want to create in the world.
That's it. That's it. That's it. How does that sound that like that it's like that you're successful in that? Like, you know what I mean? Like does it like is it just like, oh cool, like that happened, or like does it feel like do you feel you grasp how that's already happening, just the fact that that video exists and it will, exist on YouTube until you choose to take it down, and like it's out there doing its thing?
It feels really good. I think that's one of the things is I love coaching and I love facilitation because I get that real-time feedback and I can see the wheels turning. And I also want to share my thoughts with the world in a newsletter or on YouTube or whatever medium, but you don't always get that same feedback
Of
to know
course.
that it's
Of course.
inspiring people.
Truzy's totally true. Of course, right? It's just like you get X number of view numbers and you have no idea anything about that other than that's the view number moving, that there it is. Fair. Fair. Okay. So if you're talking to me or you're talking to someone listening or whatever, like what, like now I'm going to go into like a Taylor, like for you personally, like what is this moment a moment for? Like, where can people support you? What would you love them to get involved in with you? Where do you see yourself moving into or creating now, or all the things? Tell us about like your dreams, what you're making, how we can get involved.
Yeah. It feels like a very transitional time where
Hmm.
I had inner workout, which was so front and center in my career and is still
Hmm.
present, but not in the same way. So you're
Okay.
catching me as I'm in my second semester of a PhD program, as
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
And I am building women facilitating in
Yes.
collaboration with Shannon and with Annie. And for me, I'm stepping into talking about topics that are still very much related to personal and professional development, but not just leaning so much into the self-care and well-being side of things, which is where I've been. So
Okay.
this is like a fun time to see me in
Good.
progress if
Oh,
that's
fun.
something people are
Yes.
interested in. Um,
Yes.
the
Totally.
best place to stay connected is always my website slash my newsletter, just taylorelyse.com, Elyse. And then taylorelyse.com slash newsletter is where my newsletter lives. And yeah, I've honestly been really reflective of what it is that how I want to connect with people and serve people. Obviously, I coach, but is there something different that's coming in
Mm,
the horizon?
mm,
So
mwah.
that's
Yes.
why I just keep
Yes.
saying join my
Yes.
newsletter, because
Join the newsletter.
sometimes I'll do little tasks and it'll only go to the newsletter.
Yes. And if somebody was like, I really want more Taylor in my life, like then they contact you about the potential, like, are you taking on private clients right now? Yeah.
Yes, I am taking on private clients. So if you are curious about that, head to my website. There's a tab for coaching, which is like pure coaching, 60-minute sessions where there's no advice and it's really about you connecting to your own wisdom. And then I also have a different offering that is called You Did That. It's part coaching, part advising. And it's about helping you get your ideas off the ground. So those are the two core ways to work with me one on one.
Yeah, yeah. And who do you love to work with? Like, what kinds of things do you work with people on?
I love to work with visionary women. And a lot of times, the type of women that I work with are the women who are like, wait, do I count as a visionary
Yeah,
woman? Like,
totally,
I've
totally,
done these things, I've done cool things, but I don't know if I'm cool enough.
totally.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And the types of things that we work on, I work with a mix of people who are leaders in organizations, people who have like creative projects that they're bringing to the world, and people who are business owners and are doing their own thing. And we really run the gamut. Like sometimes it is more mindset stuff. Like, how do I start to see myself as a leader or a creative, or I have this way that I want to show up? How do I bridge the gap between who I know I am and how I'm showing up right now? Sometimes it's like particular interpersonal dynamics. Sometimes it is thinking through more tactical things of like, okay, I know I have this big vision in the world. How do we break it down and make it smaller so I can actually take action on it? And then in the more advising space, then it gets to be then it gets to be just more, hey, I've done a lot of things and I can also share and tell you what I've done and what worked for me.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Because it's new to me to even hear how big inner workout was for you and what that all was like. There's like so much, obviously, there's so much, that you've done and blah, blah. So just to go back to that for a second, inner workout was a company, a business that you founded, or yeah, and that you worked for a good long time, and now you're moving from that and wondering what's next in some ways.
Yeah, yeah. So Inner Workout, I've publicly launched it in September of 2019. I thought it was going to be like the Zumba of well-being. I had this mat-based practice that really incorporated different aspects of yoga. It had movement, mindfulness, meditation, journaling, and breath work. And it's over the course of like a 30 to 60-minute practice. And the idea was to help you practice listening within and responding in the most loving way possible, that definition of self-care.
Yes. Yes.
Fast forward to 6 months later,
Yeah.
COVID
Seriously.
hits.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I had thought it was going to be like all these in-person certification trainings, could not do that. Still did 3 rounds of virtual certification and realized that what people were resonating with was less the practice and more the way that I was thinking and talking about self-care. So I had a podcast that I did for, how long was that? Maybe 3 years with Inner Workout specifically. I had a book come out with Chronicle, also called Inner Workout. at the end of last year, I launched an app called Inner Workout. I've also done a lot of speaking and facilitation in this space. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I like Inner Workout had its own separate newsletter, had its own
Yes.
podcast, had all of this stuff
Yes.
in that world, and
Yes.
just realized like I'm not super interested in creating more content just for the sake of creating more content.
Okay.
I am always most excited about helping people integrate it. And it just kind of
Okay.
felt like I have this body of work. It's
Yes.
complete right now. I can still
Wow.
speak to it. I can still do
Yes.
other stuff, but I don't need to keep trying to grow it.
Amazing. Amazing. And so, and did that like lead into the PhD process and like thinking, okay, I'll work to get a PhD, and like is that a big piece of the puzzle right now?
So, building the app was thinking about the PhD because I think, if I'm being honest, I probably should have stopped Inner Workout sooner. I just
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was done with it, but I was like, ooh, if I have something that can still serve people, but it doesn't need me in
Yeah.
the moment,
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
that'll work.
Of
And
course.
so the whole idea was that I would build the app so I would have something that could serve people while I was spending more time
Yes.
on my PhD program.
Got
And
it.
then once the app came out, I was just like, I have all these beautiful marketing plans. I know how to market, and I just don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like doing it anymore. And
Yep.
that's when I decided it was time to step back, slow
Yes.
down. So they were related, the PhD and
Uh-huh.
the app and the inner workout. But I originally, like in my application, I was going to study the interaction between well-being and leadership and how leaders impact employee well-being. Like I thought it was going to help me
Yes.
go even deeper into this self-care field.
Yes. Amazing. What are you thinking now?
So I still have a year before I have to really decide on my dissertation topic, but
Beautiful.
I'm super interested in communities of practice and how being in community helps women shape their professional identities and develop their careers, especially self-employed women or women who don't have traditional careers, where it's not like we just have an HR team or
Yep.
department that can say, "Hey Darcy, like here's what you should do to keep
Here's the
getting
next
better in
step.
your
Yeah,
career."
exactly.
Like
Yes. Beautiful.
I I don't have that, you don't have that, and so
Yeah.
that's part of what I'm interested in researching.
Whoa, that's super cool. And like the inspirational bubbly pieces for me are like that it's possible to have the freedom and the creative license to be my free spirited self in building my work and my body of work and my practice and the way that I want to be me in the world, and have some like what I feel you're touching into is like what are the things that would still be really supportive, like how it's really nice to go into an HR department and be like, what do you see are my possibilities, and have someone actually be able to interface with me again, like this framework idea, give me some options of framework that would be inspiring and exciting, but I didn't have to like work for that organization and be on their path or be under their cultural umbrella. Like I can be fully me, but also have a place for that supportive framework. So cool.
Yeah. And I think for me in my career, so much of that comes from being in community with other women and seeing, oh, that's interesting how Darcy runs her business, or that's interesting how this person is doing this, or I've never encountered this with a client before. How do I move through it? Like
Oh,
we have to
absolutely.
tap into our own communities and networks. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of research on what that looks like for self-employed
Wow.
women.
Wow. And I'm really grateful for you that you're willing to do that research aspect, because that is sounds terrible to me, but I would be really excited for that research to be done. Meaning, like, I don't want to be the one to do it. Thank you so much for, because it's so needed. It's so needed. The fact that you would be willing to dig into that and do all that, like quantitative, qualitative survey, woo, wow, no thank you to me, but like, thank you for being open to exploring it. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm also like, we're recording this in March of 2025. You may talk to me next year. And I'm like, hey, just
Oh,
kidding.
new
Actually,
spot.
this
Oh,
other
thank you.
direction.
Well, that's the beauty of this current moment. Exactly. It's March 2025. This is the current sense, but we never know, right? And it's always up for that exciting possibilities. We never know if like it's this and then we deepen into it, or this was just meant to bring us to that next idea that brought us to three ideas from there that ended up being what your dissertation was on. And like you found with inner workout, it all speaks to everything anyway, right? Whether you're currently, executing a beautiful marketing plan for inner workout or talking to me and working on your PhD, it's like all steps in the process of us being ourselves.
Exactly. And I'm just such a big believer that in this, the way that we figure out what we want is through doing things, through having experiences. And I think what often gets packaged up to us in the self-help space, the online space, is like, if you can go through this course, then you will know what you want in life, when you might be just as well served to like go take a pottery class, or to go take a class at your local university, or go volunteer at a nonprofit and really be present in that experience and see what you learn about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for doing things. And that's why I got so excited when you said you're listening to the video and then you had to pause, because there are all of these ideas. And hopefully some of those ideas you're going to execute, and then you're going to learn more about yourself and what you actually want.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. I love again that sense that like being in the possibilities and that trusting ourselves, right? Like I trust myself, so whether it's a pottery class that I'm called to, or a class at the university, or a specific coach's, class on da da da, like either way, like I trust myself that this is the way to find my next step. And no one outside of me gets to tell me what that next step is. I'm creating it for myself. That's so beautiful. And you touched on such a, huge topic around, right, coaching industry. I'm sure you and I could do like a whole podcast series on that baby. But
For real.
so cool, right? Like I love also you're in the space of coaching and you're like respectfully, whatever, we could tell you whatever, I mean, this is my impression, but it's just like disrupting that space of what we may have come to expect, and being like, hold on, again, let's bring it back to the foundational pieces. Why are you here? What is this for? How can I help you? But knowing that like the person that comes, their inner wisdom, their trust in themselves, it is like first and foremost, always and forever. And like we go from there, not pushing that aside, not in spite of that, not anything. Like we go from that place.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, thank you so much for this. I know when we started, I was like, it could be, 15 minutes, 20, whatever. And like, we're at 40 minutes. I think. So we did good. But so any like last pieces you wanted to say before we wrap?
Yeah. I think for myself, I'm thinking about what it looks like to more intentionally help people build their own frameworks or meaning making systems, ways of viewing the world. That is really exciting to me. And then I think for people, I just want to encourage you to take action, even really small action. And if it doesn't feel safe enough to do that, that's when you can root into some of the self-care. Like, what can you do to build a sense of trust and safety with yourself so that it feels like you can take action?
Absolutely. And like as I hear you talking about that, it's like just so clear, that sense of like framework. Like, okay, if I could just say like when you were in inner workout and then, close it for that moment, and then in different things, and now seeing, like you saw it as like a chapter closing, but now you see how it's all so related. To me, it's like, oh my gosh, the micro and the meta of the frameworks, like you're really good at creating frameworks around each thing. Your life is also a framework, right? Like you were building on, each thing builds on itself. You're actually like building the steps of your framework in your life with like 5 years of dedication to this. And then here you are with this. Like, isn't that incredible how what we teach, we're most here to learn, like all the things of it just all connecting in these super, like very, very cool ways.
Yeah. And it's like you can't plan it. That's why I think the action is so important, because like I could not have planned that that's what happened. I just had to keep taking step after step after step. And then all of a sudden it brought us to the point where we're taking this having this conversation.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. That's so, so, so cool. And what I would say is just you're such an example of like be in action and share it in that way that helps like bring it out there and have other possibilities emerge or conversations emerge or situations emerge, because like I am very supported by your courage to just share the framework, put it into a 15-minute video, 10-minute video, share it out there. It again, it has that like bubbly, exciting effect. You're like living what you're teaching in that way. Like you're in action, and inspires me to be in action, and then it builds the trust and integrity that you're like be in action because I'm like I see you in action. It's all speaks to each other in such a supportive, right? Building out the framework kind of way, one step at a time. You're in it, and then you're teaching it, and then you're in it, and then you're teaching it. It's like, yeah, I want in on that ride,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm trying to get better. I think it's so easy for me to say, and this goes back to the way versus the whirl. I feel like I have to have everything figured out and I have to follow all of these steps and then I can share. But
Oh,
what I'm hearing is what is drawing you to this work and to this conversation is the fact that I'm just moving. I'm moving and I'm learning and I'm doing and I'm sharing.
yes.
And that can create its own momentum.
Exactly. And its own inspiration of, like if you're back to like the mission of you, like if you had, for instance, a mission that people find their trust in themselves and then take action to create what they know they're here to create, that kind of thing. It's like that's occurring as you're also creating your own life. You're also like the mission you have is simultaneously being fulfilled as you're also creating it. How cool.
That is really cool. I'm
That's
like,
really
oh,
cool.
yeah.
Okay, right? Like here we go. Like it just gets to be one more day where those things get to be true. Right? There's no like achievement point. Like before this, I wasn't doing it, and now I woke up this morning and I am, or I got this thing and now I am, or whatever. It's like no. It's occurring the whole time by you just authentically sharing as yourself. There it is. Right? And also, you're working on a PhD, and you might do this research on da-da-da, and it might lead to this, and blah, 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 blah. But, like, it's all already occurring as we go. Because you're willing to just be you, sharing what you're sharing, live in the questions, and here we are.
And here we are.
And here we are. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yay!